gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Change of Pace Live Weekly, the podcast. We usually start off the episode very happy, in a pretty uplifting mood. Today's episode is a bit more solemn. We're still trying to get over what happened yesterday, the Chris Woakes, Josh Buttler special that we were put through. It just seems like again and again, these players that are out of form take Pakistan at liberty, and Pakistan give them the opportunity to step up and make sure that they become legends in folklore of their national sides. But with us, we've got a very special guest, Freddie Wilde he's an independent commentator, he's a writer, currently also works with CricViz as an analyst. And we spoke to him earlier about WinViz and how statistics and stuff work. Yesterday on the commentary, Freddie, I'll start with you, because yesterday on the commentary we had a lot of very upset people, and they were upset because Pakistan were losing, but they were also upset because Pakistan were supposed to win, because WinViz told them that there was an 86% of Pakistan winning. Now on Change of Pace we have another metric called DilViz, something that we've come up with. Now, Dil means heart in Urdu, so that just means whatever we're feeling. And I'll tell you what, even at 123 for 5, DilViz was saying 50-50. CricViz was saying 86 and 14 to Pakistan. So could you please explain to us how WinViz works? And
how we got it right.
And how we got it right, and the numbers got it wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's worth saying. So in that situation, firstly, thanks for having me. And yeah, I mean, WinViz in that situation is essentially saying, if you play that match 100 times, Pakistan will win 86 times. And the fact that they didn't end up winning doesn't make that wrong. If anything, it underlines, I suppose, how well England did to fight back from that situation. It's a model which takes account of all of the players playing in the game, their career records, the venue that's being played at, and then the current score, and then it uses what's called a Monte Carlo simulator and simulates the game thousands of times, and then produces an outcome which then is translated into a percentage, if you like. And I think it's actually quite interesting that you guys say, DilViz saying 50%. Among all the fans in world cricket, I don't think any set of fans is more pessimistic about their side's sort of chances of completing a game such as that as Pakistan's. And that's probably because there are plenty of matches in the past where they've blown positions of advantage, and I'm sure you guys can recount many. And so I often find it quite amusing, sort of on Twitter and stuff, you can tell that Pakistani fans will often underclub how much they are in that game. But I think, realistically, I would say that 86% at that stage felt fair enough.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
you look at the way, and not only looking at the model, but just in terms of the way that the game was going, the way that Stokes fell and Pope, both to balls which really misbehaved off the track. For me, the whole sense of the game was heading in a direction whereby Pakistan were going to wrap that up, because conditions were tough. England were 5 down. Butler's been out form. Woakes has been out form. It felt like a mountain to climb for England. And I think, 86%, or maybe 80% might have been maybe more fair. I don't know, but I wouldn't have disagreed with that. I didn't disagree with it at the time. And as I said, I think it underlines how well England did to win the game. And I suppose Pakistan did blow the opportunity to go 1-0 up in the series.
Freddie, in terms, let me have a go at Masood. In terms of the context of the partnership, if we zoom out and we think about it in terms of history, I honestly think this was one of the most remarkable test partnerships I've ever seen. I think it's right up there with Lakshman and Rahul Dravid back in 2001. Like, the odds were so incredibly against it to do it in those conditions, 117 for 5, to just take away the game so quickly from Pakistan. What do you think? What is your expert eye? What happened with the pitch, and what did Pakistan do wrong? A lot of questions have been raised about the captaincy, about the field setting. What is your view on what went wrong for Pakistan and what went right for England?
I think throughout this test match, and one thing that I really enjoyed about the test was, I think that the team who took charge of the game at each individual moment did so largely because they played good cricket rather than the opposition playing bad cricket. And yesterday, there were certainly some questionable decisions made by Azhar Ali with his field placements and possibly with some bowling changes. But the very initial shift, when the 5th wicket fell, England scored 50 runs off 49 balls prior to tea. Now that, for me, was a result of England batting well. Butler and Woakes basically decided to go into one-day mode. That's where Butler's obviously made his name. And they took the attack to Pakistan, a little bit like Pakistan did on the second afternoon after lunch, when England started with Anderson and Broad and Shadab and Shan played very busily, and for an hour. Yeah, the game was shifted towards Pakistan. I think, again, England made some questionable decisions there with the ball. You could argue Archer and Woakes should have bowled in that period, but the change in momentum came from Pakistan batting well, and I think similarly England deserve credit for shifting the pressure back onto Pakistan. That said, Pakistan weren't as threatening with the ball, I don't think, yesterday as the day went on, as I think many people thought they would. Yasir, I thought, was pretty good throughout the day. The quicks, I think there's a question mark on them a little bit. I think a lot of people thought that Pakistan would find some reverse swing, and that was what was spoken about on commentary a lot. And looking at our ball tracking data, in the first innings, they found 0.98 degrees of old ball swing. So that's between overs 30 and 79, whereas in the second innings, just 0.48, and that's quite low. So that you can see there that in the first innings, they got the ball to move later on, and yesterday they didn't. And I think that was a key factor. I think England played really well. I think a lot of the credit has to go to England, in the end, Pakistan weren't far away. I mean, 3 wickets was the margin of victory, and it was quite tight. But you'd hope, I think, certainly at the start of the innings, Pakistan were favourites, and definitely when they were 5 down. And I don't know, you've got Naseem and Shaheen, 2 quite young bowlers. They're obviously very good bowlers. But that in games of such fine margins, those kind of small differences can end up being very significant. I think Pakistan made a couple of poor decisions, but I don't think they were terrible.
Ahmed, let me come to you about this, because reverse swing is one of those things that is quintessentially Pakistani. We hate it when it doesn't happen, and we love it when it does. We'd like to own it. We like to say that we almost termed it. And Wasim Akram was on commentary, and he was quite vocal about this. And he was actually quite adamant about the fact that the young Pakistani pace attack did not take care of the ball correctly. Now, how much do you think of that is ball maintenance, for lack of a better term, or the way the pitch behaved?
I think a lot of it has to do with the ball maintenance, because Wasim was saying on air at the time that it's the entire team that has to look after the ball. It's not just the pacers, it's not just the guys who are actually bowling, but the fielders. Because if you look at England, I think they're one of the best sides in the world when it comes down to exploiting reverse swing and taking care of the ball. They have designated guys who sweat a certain amount. They shine the ball in a certain way. Only certain guys touch the ball. And for us, with the spinners bowling and with the abrasive conditions of the pitch, we just weren't doing enough. And I mean, statistically, like Freddie said, if we're only getting half as much swing in an innings where you actually really need to exploit that scale set, it was just going against us. And I think one of the biggest reasons that we suffered was the lack of reverse swing, because if you look at, again, Shaheen and Naseem and Abbas bowling around the 40 to 60th overs, the ball was just completely dead straight. It's outside the off stump, but it's not moving an inch to the left or to the right. The guys were driving, they're going through cover, they're going through a point. It was easy pickings for them.
So I guess
just one other point I was just going to make very briefly on Pakistan is one of the things I've noticed with Buttler, and everyone obviously knows about how good he is in white ball cricket. I think he is someone who enjoys the fact when the field is spread and there aren't men round the bat in that way, that sort of claustrophobic manner that can happen in Test cricket. He enjoys that. We've seen him play some of his best Test innings have come in the situation where he puts the pressure back on the opposition and the field spreads. And yesterday, I wonder whether Azhar did spread the field a little too soon in terms of getting defensive about the fact that, England are still in this game. He got a bit panicked, perhaps. And actually, if the best, it takes nerve, right, to continue attacking when the runs required are whittling down. Yeah. But I do think with Buttler in particular, he is one player who has displayed a lot more comfort, let's say, when the field is back and when it's, he can knock the ball around, because he's an expert at that. And I think that's one thing I think that stands out yesterday in terms of Azhar's captaincy.
So let me go ahead. Is the Joss Buttler debate now finally over once and for good? Or what's going to happen? Because next week there'll be another murmurs. What are we doing with him? What do we do with him?
No, I don't think it's over. I think it's the last couple of innings he got a 50 in the last test against the West Indies, which helped. He obviously got a 50 here, a crucial 50 here. His keeping was an issue in the first innings. I don't think that the murmurs will go away, to be honest, until he scores big and consistently, really, because I think that might be wrong, but what the problem is for Joss is because he's so good in white ball, we're almost holding him to those standards in red ball, when actually what we should be doing is comparing him to what Folks will do. And Folks would definitely have kept better than Buttler in this test match because he's definitely a superior gloveman, but I don't think he'd have played the innings that Buttler played yesterday. And that's what we have to think. And that's what I think muddies the debate around Buttler, is we're constantly holding him to very, very high standards because we think he's a white ball genius. And we think, he can be A.B. de Villiers for England in test cricket. He's not going to be A.B. de Villiers because he's, he's only ever averaged 33 in first class cricket, and he's not going to be able to average 45 in test cricket. I think we need to adjust our expectations.
Yeah. Now, let's play him against Pakistan, though. It's fine.
Yes.
Like if he doesn't play against anyone, play him against Pakistan.
That's true. He has a very good record against you guys.
Yeah.
Him and Chris Woakes both. But let's work backwards here because we've talked about the fourth innings chase. Obviously, that was due to some spectacular batting and that complete shift in mindset after lunch that Woakes and Buttler had. But Khwaja, I'm going to ask you about this because you've always been a big Misbah Ul Haq advocate as a player and as a coach. Now, we saw after the second day of Test cricket, Misbah Ul Haq come up on a press conference and he was asked very optimistically about a follow-on opportunity, which obviously was not provided by England. But he immediately responded that his style of Test cricket is to play the other team out of the game. So rather than going for the kill, he first, if we want to use WinViz as a metric, we say he wants to reduce the opposition to 0%, practically speaking. Now, you could discuss how Pakistan didn't get 20 wickets, but do you reckon if you hold Misbah's template of winning a test match in retrospect, then wasn't the game lost in the third innings when Pakistan scored only 169?
That was definitely a very shoddy effort in the third innings of the match by Pakistan. If they had a very good lead and Abid Ali had gotten a big opportunity when Stokes grasped him early on. And then he was striking the ball well against Anderson, who was looking very, very grumpy already. He wasn't in the groove. Although his speeds were up, but he just wasn't, the rub of the green, so to say, wasn't with him. So, and then you just throw away your wicket to Dom Bess of all people, who had been bowling it wasn't that great considering we thought it would be a turning pitch. Then Babar Azam just, fishing at one once again, and Azhar Ali missing a straight ball. It was a half volley on leg stump, and he basically middle and length, and he missed it. So our batsman definitely failed to show up in this third innings, and we have more questions than answers on how is this batting unit going to go further ahead into the two tests in Southampton. And honestly, we should have batted England out of the game, make 350, 375. But even then, 277 was a large target. And we were sitting pretty at 117 for 5. But then, they just took the game away. So, it's just plenty of unanswered questions that leave us nowhere, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but Freddie, we're talking about Chris Woakes, the batsman. That third innings for England, again, like you said earlier in the show, that this test match hasn't been won by mistakes. It's been won by the sides actually playing well, batting or bowling the other team out of it. So let's talk about Chris Woakes, the bowler, who showed up pretty well in the third innings as well. He got more wickets than Anderson as well. And I was listening to the Sky Sports debate this evening. They said he's got 88 wickets now in England at a better average than Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, Woakes is in home conditions, in English conditions, is one of England's most valuable players, without a doubt. He's perfectly suited to exploit the conditions from a bowling perspective and is in a peak of his career, I suppose, age-wise, whereas Anderson most certainly is, at the end of his career, and Broad similarly, whilst he's having a resurgence. Woakes is in that absolute prime, and he's bowling very well, and he's perfectly suited to exploiting conditions. And then from a batting perspective, he's got a very robust technique. I mean, recently, I think Stokes is probably arguably the best technician in England's side, and Pope and Root are sort of almost, absurdly talented. But just looking at the technique of Woakes, it's very strong and solid. He has some issues with the short ball in recent years, but generally, he's pretty well set up to deal with the kind of conditions you face in England. And it was brilliant to see him contribute with the bat after a run of poor form, actually. And it was interesting that England had promoted him to number 7 at a time when his batting's arguably under more sort of clouds of doubt than ever before. And he stepped up and played, without a doubt, his finest test innings. But he's a phenomenal player. And I think, it's causing England some serious selection headaches in terms of how they can fit all of these very good bowlers into the side. And particularly now, obviously, with the big news today about Ben Stokes being out of the rest of the series, Woakes' all-round capabilities are going to be exceptionally important. I expect he'll play probably the remaining 2 tests of the series now, whereas previously there might have been some debate about his spot in the side. And that sort of sums up how difficult it is to get into England's team at the moment. I think he would have definitely played in the second test, but he might have been rotated out for the third. And now I think Woakes will play the rest of the series.
But isn't that unfair to Woakes and some of the other guys, given the fact that I feel right now Jimmy Anderson's just taking up a spot based on reputation more than anything?
Possibly. I think. Yeah. I mean, this was probably. I was talking to a colleague about this morning. This is possibly the first time in a decade where Anderson isn't a definite, or is quite possibly the guy to miss out for England.
Yeah.
And that's based on recent form and how they've been bowling. Broad, without a doubt, has to play. Woakes, I think, is, for all the reasons we've just spoken about, hard to leave him out. Archer brings something different, and that's why I would be very reluctant to leave Archer out in favour of Anderson, Woakes, and Broad in the same attack. If you were to be only having three seamers, I think Archer gives a different angle of attack. And so Anderson is, as a result, under pressure. I think that my colleague wrote a piece about this the other day on our website about how Anderson's his figures probably don't reflect how well he has bowled. He has probably been a little bit unlucky, and I definitely think, as we've seen with Broad, write off legends at your peril. However, at some point, it will be the end for Anderson, and we'll say, "Oh no, give him another test because he's gonna, he's such a great bowler, he'll come back." That won't happen at some point. I don't think it's now. It could be now. Maybe this is the end, and maybe he might be rested from the next test and come back for the third. There will be some ins and outs with the pace attack, but you're completely right. Anderson, particularly as Woakes continues to do as well as he does, because Broad, Anderson and Woakes are all such similar bowlers, that places particular pressure on Anderson. It will be fascinating to see how England deal with that over the coming two test matches, especially as well with a winter tour to India penciled in. That's not somewhere where Anderson's historically going to have that much success, and how they manage this moving forward is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to save the James Anderson question for you to the end of the show, but I think it's such a big debate that we've covered it 10 minutes in. And but I've also seen, like Nasser Hussain talk about it on Sky. He was actually very reluctant to say that I don't think Jimmy should play the next test match because he's just that big of a presence in England cricket. I mean, it's been, more than 15 years or about 15 years since he's been around. But you mentioned Joe Root, you mentioned Ollie Pope. I actually went through some of your writing, some of your Twitter timeline, and you seem to be a pretty big believer in Ollie Pope's batting. You think he's probably one of the best batsmen in the English side. And you mentioned about that first innings, which was a pretty big disaster for England, considering that, yes, Pakistan bowled well, but some of those dismissals for England were questionable too. And one of the key stats you mentioned was his leave percentage. He was at 13% and everybody else was at 23%. What do you make of Ollie Pope coming in at number 3 and Joe Root finally moving to number 4?
Well, I wouldn't do that to Pope yet. I think for me, Pope is, for many reasons, well, I think Pope, full stop, is one of the best young batsmen in the world. I think his first-class record proves that. He's got an average of around 60. His test record as well now, average nudging 50, is superb. He's clearly a phenomenal talent. I would be very wary of moving him up the order too soon. I think part of why he's having the success he is having is because of where he's coming in. Admittedly, he played his fantastic innings in the first innings essentially from a position of, number 3. It came in at 12 for 3 after 4 or 5 overs. But I think that it's better for him. We've seen many great players start their career low down the order, learn their craft, and then move up. Ricky Ponting batted at 6 for many years before moving to number 3. I think, the earlier you bat, the harder it is, and the sooner then the Pope goes through a lean run, and the sooner we start questioning him, and the less experience he has to fall back on to try and regain form. I think it's far better for England to leave him at 5 or 6 I'd personally leave him there for a couple of years and then move him up. That's how I'd like to manage a talent such as Pope. But yeah, you're right to mention his knock in the first innings, and I tweeted this yesterday, and his leave percentage. What was fantastic, I think Woakes and Buttler will receive a lot of the credit because of the nature of the fourth innings chase and how it all unfolded. But Pope's innings in the first innings for England from 12 for 3 was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And that turned the game. And I think what was really interesting there, and you referencing his leave percentage, is how he took the game to Pakistan. And that's what I mean by all of the shifts in momentum in this test seem to come from the other team, putting the other team under pressure rather than mistakes. Pakistan at 12 for 3 were rampant. And just compare the nature of Pope's innings to the nature of Root's. Root's probably one of England's greatest ever test batsmen. Root was there off 1 off 30 balls. Pope was going at nearly a run a ball for a period of time. And it's that emphasis on, again, his leave percentage being lower, getting bat on ball, turning the strike over, that put the pressure back on Pakistan. And that was a phenomenal innings from Pope. I think his finest test innings, actually. He's got 100, obviously, in South Africa, but I think this one was better. I'm a very, very vocal fan of Shaheen Shah Afridi. I think he's a phenomenal talent. And that battle between those two, just generally in this test match, was fantastic to see. I think that's two of the finest test players, young test players in the world. Shaheen obviously won the battle yesterday by getting that ball to spit off a length. But it was a great to and fro, and it's something that I think we can enjoy throughout the series.
That's actually what I wanted to move into next, because that second innings in the test match was, very much about Pakistan's bowling as much as it was about Ollie Pope's counterattack. Khwaja, because you're the Lahore Qalandars fan here, and you wear your heart on your sleeve for Shaheen Shah Afridi, that first innings performance from him was special to say the least. And we always talk about on air about how he's so exceptionally talented, but I feel like we say that a lot about a lot of Pakistani pacers. What's different about Shaheen, and maybe Freddie can speak to this after you, is the control that he has and the discipline that he has. It feels like he's already played Test cricket for like 5 or 10 years.
Exactly. It's even for the likes of us who have seen Amar back in 2009 and 2010, where he was swinging the ball all over the place, and bowling those magic deliveries, the control and over length and line that Shaheen has, as we saw in the first and second innings with the new ball against Rory Burns and Sibley, and the way he was constantly nagging away, pitching the ball up in the absolute right areas, is just remarkable to see a young bowler. He's only about 20, 21, 5 or 6 test matches in, and such control and such command over his length. And he even got to Joe Root leg before, which was overturned in the first innings. So I honestly have rarely seen such a young bowler controlling the new ball so well. And of course, we've seen in the PSL and in the one-day formats, he can be a match winner, a straight match winner in those, and he can pitch the ball up, get those Yorkers in as well. So I'm honestly very surprised that he doesn't get the love that he deserves, although Freddie seems to be a big fan and probably has some numbers to back it as well. I want to know what's Freddie's opinion on Naseem Shah and the way he bowled in this test as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, just to talk about Shaheen first, then Naseem. I mean, I think Shaheen, for me, why I'm so excited by him is he's such an attacking bowler. We see this in white ball cricket. He pitches the ball up early on and looks for wickets. And we know in white ball cricket that the earlier wickets are taken, the more valuable they are. He brings that approach into the test game. The bowler he reminds me of is Mitchell Starc. And that's not just because they're both left armers, but it's because they both look to take wickets all the time. They're very attacking, particularly with the new ball. It's Shaheen will run in and bowl full, and we saw that in the first innings. He bowled a full ball. It was slightly too straight, and Burns clipped him for 4. But then he wasn't put off by
the first over,
And a lot of other bowlers would be, and they'd pull their length back. Certainly the likes of Anderson and Broad, who are fantastic, great bowlers with fantastic careers. And if Shaheen gets anywhere close to that, they'll be very happy. But they are, defensive in their mindset more often than not. And that's what's so exciting about Shaheen, is that he continues to pitch the ball up, and obviously he was rewarded in that over with the wicket of Burns. And broadly, I think throughout the test, he probably bowled better than his figures deserve, or figures reflected. It will be interesting to see how you talk about Misbah's approach to Test cricket, and we obviously saw this when he was captain, but now when he's coach, it is about getting the other side out of the game. There's sort of a defensive approach to winning games, and I don't mind that at all. It's what made him a fantastic, one of Pakistan's greatest captains, took Pakistan to world #1. That's how he plays, or how he's going to build a side. I'm fine with that. It'll be very interesting to see how Shaheen, as a bowler almost contrary to that approach, someone who looks for wickets all the time, how he fits into that. And I think the nature of Pakistan's attack means he can continue to be that attacking bowler, because I think we've obviously got Abbas, who is essentially almost like a holding spinner. He is attacking too, and that he pitches
human metronome.
He's so reliable. He's always going to offer control. And I think then just leading nicely into Naseem, who Naseem reminded me of, and we're getting some overlaps here between Australia and Pakistan, was Pat Cummins. And at CricViz, we get ball tracking data from the providers at the ground. And one thing that's noticeable about Naseem and about Cummins, in fact, is either of them don't find that much lateral movement. They're not guys who swing the ball massively or seam it massively. They can do, but their primary skill is bowling at good pace and bowling consistently. Naseem bowled more balls on a good line in that test match in Manchester than any other bowler on display. Now that's very impressive. Everyone gets excited about his pace, and rightly so. 140 clicks. It's serious pace for a 17-year-old. But the control of line is relentless. He doesn't give him an inch. And I think that's something that Naseem, Abbas and Shaheen as a trio moving forward, I can see it working nicely. And I can see that helping Shaheen continue to be attacking with Abbas and Naseem offering control. Obviously, how that fits in with the spinner, because Yasir and Shadab, I suppose, are also attacking options, is interesting. And that's actually, I suppose, a broader question. Misbah's playing this kind of controlling style of cricket with Yasir, Shadab and Shaheen. There are 3 bowlers there who might be prone to go for runs. Now, the comment you made about Shaheen is completely right. He was still able to offer some control, and that's testament to what a brilliant bowler he is. But it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic unfolds. They've got so much talent. It'll just be interesting to see how they manage it.
I think the one problem that Misbah did have in his glory days in the Miss You era was they never had a dominant fast bowler like that. They had Junaid Khan, Tanveer Ahmed, and
Imran Khan.
Rahat Ali. They were not the first tier bowlers he would ideally have had. So he couldn't really put the throat, take the game to the opposition in terms of his fast bowling. So he had to play that long con in his sort of way with the spinners, just drag out the game, especially in the barren deserts of the UAE, where the game only starts going on day 3, day 4. So I think it'll definitely be a test of his coaching, that how he manages them. He can't, curtail their attacking instincts. So that's one way that Coach Misbah / Selector Misbah will have to change his approach in the future as well.
And also, just because of the fact that Azhar Ali is a relatively inexperienced captain, you sense that this is almost Misbah's team as much as it is Azhar's team right now. And so, Azhar will grow into the role, but just how both of those two interact and how it works with the bowling attack will be very interesting.
Even that growth is very dependent on his form, because both the A's, Azhar and Asad, are in serious pressure. And with Babar being made the vice captain, that's another nod that mate, get ready. It could be happen. The switch could happen anytime, any minute.
But this is the thing. That's why I'm so surprised about the 4th innings yesterday, especially when Buttler and Woakes came out to bat, because like Freddie's saying, it is essentially Misbah's team, and the orders and everything you could see when the wickets were falling or the traps were being set, it was Misbah's plans. But then when Buttler and Woakes come out, it's not Misbah's team anymore. It wasn't Misbah's plan, because you could see the ball wasn't hitting the stumps as much. The fast bowlers weren't going exactly the way that Misbah would have wanted, because if you think about Misbah with Rahats and Imrans and all these guys, they were wicket-to-wicket bowlers. They were just going at the stumps and keeping you tight, just playing straight back down the ground, choke you out for a good 15, 20 overs, and then you give your wicket away. I didn't see that yesterday. These guys really took the attack and started changing things.
We talked about this, Ahmed, about Shaheen Shah's Afridi coming left arm over the wicket. I thought that was an interesting line. It might have been even a little bit defensive to say, but we've talked about Naseem, we've talked about Shaheen, and before I go on to the mammoth knock that was Shan Masood 156, Ahmed, I want to ask you this, because you grew up idolizing a lot of pace bowlers, with Shoaib and Wasim and Waqar, and even after that, Asif and Amr, with Amr being quite quick when he was young. Now you got Muhammad Abbas. First of all, he doesn't look like one of your typical attractive, long-haired, aggressive Pakistani fast bowlers. And he certainly doesn't bowl like one either, because Freddie put out a stat earlier in the test match about how they have a database going back to 2006, if I'm not wrong. And in that database, amongst all bowlers, in terms of good line length, he's got 81% of his deliveries in that area. So he's arguably the most accurate bowler of recent times. He's a human metronome, as I like to call him. Where does he fit in this spectrum of great fast Pakistani bowlers?
I mean, he's a breath of fresh air in the sense that you're getting a guy who's no longer concerned about sheer out and out pace. He likes to have his control. I was looking at a stat, I guess, again from the guys at CricViz. He had about 0.4 degrees of swing in the first innings, and he was the lowest among every bowler on display. So he's not someone who's getting the ball to jag off the pitch, or he's not someone who's bending the ball in the air. But that consistency and that line and length, it just hurts you so much, because it constantly tests your pad, tests your bat, and again, you get one of those deliveries that only straightens a fraction, it's taking the edge, or it straightens a fraction the other way and it's taking your pad. So he's, again, the anti-Pakistani fast bowler.
Yeah.
He's someone he's the anti-hero, but he's someone who's so aggressive in the way that he bowls and even in the way that he celebrates after those wickets that you start to feel like he is a Pakistani fast bowler after all. But everything up until then, leading up to those 78 mile or 80 mile an hour trundling deliveries, doesn't remind you of anything.
Actually, I remember listening to the preview of the test on the CricViz podcast with Freddie and Ben, and they described him as a dad to Shaheen and Naseem, and that was, I believe, really the perfect combination. One guy's a young firebrand, the other guy's an up-and-coming thoroughbred, and then you have the grateful dad, just guiding them along. This is how you do it. Yeah. This is how you do it, lads. Just watch me and learn from me. So that was a really good chemistry that these three have, which I think in the long term is going to be good for us.
I mean, he for English conditions, like there are a lot of bowlers in county cricket like Abbas who are essentially 80 mile an hour. They've got tidy, efficient actions. They put the ball on a spot, and they wreak havoc. None of them are as good. Abbas is the ultimate version of that. He is unbelievably accurate, and he's got that ability to get the ball to particularly move in off the seam, as we saw when he got Sibley out.
That was a ridiculous ball.
I tweeted this at the time, and I'd love to speak to Abbas about it. I've spoken to a lot of former players and coaches and asked them whether seam movement is something that can be controlled. Obviously, swing, you change which way the ball is shined and which way it turns, but which way it swings rather. But for seam, most players and coaches have just told me that it's random. Now, when I watch Abbas and when I watch Philander as well, I wonder whether it is because they seem to set batsmen up with seam movement. So in the case of Sibley, Abbas moved 4 or 5 balls away and then pinned him with one that moved in. And it's almost like, I mean, maybe it's random and it just worked out, but it's a phenomenal skill.
But it's not the first time that's happened.
For English conditions. No, exactly. And Philander did it famously to Kohli, and Abbas has done it for many bowlers too, is just drag them across the crease and then get one to go back in. It just makes you think that they're doing something.
That's another hidden dark art that we need to discover.
Sure, so this is nice, right? Because you're saying that, is he not a classic kind of Pakistani bowler? And I completely agree with you. But isn't it quite cool that there's for a lot of the Pakistani bowlers of years gone by, it's about pace and reverse swing. And again, the reverse swing is kind of a mystical art. Yeah. Well, maybe with Abbas, the new mystical art is this seam movement. How does he do it? And I suppose Mohammad Asif is possibly the other bowler who had similar traits, is that ability to bowl a good line of length and then nibble the ball both ways. And it wouldn't surprise me, given what I've read about Asif, if he had some kind of control over that because he was such a skilled operator. And maybe that's been passed down from him to Abbas. I don't know. But it's fantastic to watch. You guys Pakistan are blessed with those
they
three.
They do something that we don't know about. There is something there we need to discover.
As blessed as Pakistan are with great fast bowlers, we are not as blessed in terms of opening batsmen, and we struggle. And it gets even more difficult when you're playing in England, because if you take a look at, and Khwaja was very vocal about this on the commentary as well, take a look at overseas batsmen when they come to England, especially if you're opening the batting, you don't get big hundreds. When we were watching that first test match and Abid Ali and Shan Masood had gone through 15 overs, basically in hours of play, we were delighted. We didn't care what the scoreboard said. We said, great, the first hour is negotiated. Well, the guy went on to score 156, albeit a couple of chances were given to him. Just like Ollie Pope in the first innings, his leave percentage was 20%, and that's a 17% increase from the last time he was in England in 2016. Khwaja, I'll start with you, because again, a very rare commodity. This is a gem for Pakistan, and even outside of Pakistan, I would say it's a gem of innings. Where does it stand for you in the great Pakistani test innings and the great test innings an opener has played in England?
For a Pakistani, just forget about it. I think this was nothing less than a miracle for a Pakistani batsman to come in first day of the series, first 2 days of the series, a fresh series in England against the likes of Stuart Broad, James Anderson, Chris Woakes, and to be so assertive at the crease and look so calm at the crease, even when wickets were sort of falling around on a stop-start day on day one and day two. To have he had his opportunities, he got a bit of luck, but that's par for the course in England. You can't survive. You can't play a chanceless innings there. But to go on and get a big 100, especially for a middling player for the most part of his career, mid-30s average, nothing too flash, to come in and play an innings like that. And to be honest, I would love to find out Freddie's response to this. I think this might be one of the great overseas innings ever, period, by a touring batsman against England. I thought to be quite honest, only Graham Smith's magnum opus on his first test as captain at Lords, I think about 270 or something ridiculous. I truly feel that was the only superior innings to this for a touring batsman to come up and play in England. If maybe I'm overdoing it, but I honestly feel it is.
You're forgetting Mohsin Khan had a double century in England.
Okay, we didn't see that. That's all.
Fine, I'm just saying, but numerically, it's up there.
In modern times, and I can't speak for much before that, having not seen cricket, from 30, 40 years ago. But in modern times, it's right up there. Coming in the first test of a series, the attack that England have at their disposal, Archer, Broad, I mean, Anderson and Broad themselves, two legends of the game. Archer, one of the most exciting young bowlers in the world, and then Chris Woakes, who we've said in English conditions is phenomenal. To come in and on the first morning they bowled really well. And then they were on and off for rain and bad light, and he saw through all of that and then capitalised later on when he needed to with the tail. So it was a masterclass, a really, really great innings. The fact that he was given 2 chances possibly detracts slightly from it. Obviously, you can't help that as a batsman, but he did give those 2 chances up. And there might have been innings in the past that had been considered chanceless, I suppose. And I think history will wrongly look on it less favourably because they didn't win the test. Had they won it, and that's not really fair in terms of if we were just judging an innings purely on how good it is in isolation, we shouldn't look at the result, but that's how we will and how the wider media does, I'm afraid. And I think as a result, it will be forgotten more, or not forgotten, but held in less high esteem than perhaps it should be. But yeah, I mean, if Pakistan had won, that was the innings that set up the victory. And it was fantastic to see. It was a really good knock.
It also means that Imam Ul Haq will have to wait before he plays a test match in this series, because that's finally Pakistan, which is fine, exactly. I think Pakistan finally have a set of openers because Abid Ali is in a pretty decent run of form. Freddie, I'll go to you about this because the second test match coming up, before the summer started for England, they talked about fast bowler rotation. You've already been asked the Jimmy Anderson question, so I won't go there again. But are you making any changes to a side that's won? Because yes, England have won, but it's not really the perfect performance.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to now, obviously, with Stokes out. Yeah. So Stokes is not playing. And of all the players that England could lose, no one is going to create a greater headache than losing, probably the world's best all-rounder, maybe not if you're not counting Shakib. So that's going to pose a huge problem for them. What are they going to do? They're going to have to bring in a batsman, because with Woakes at 7, they're already light from the batting perspective. So you'd think Crawley comes in. Crawley's the next in line from a batting perspective. Dan Lawrence is another one who's been in and around the squad, but I'd see Crawley being in as the first move, and then they could leave the rest of it as is. They could keep it at that. They might want to continue to strengthen the batting. Maybe Sam Curran comes in and they might rotate one of Archer or Anderson out for a test match. That could happen. Wood could come in for Archer, so they could do some rotation with the bowlers there. Another thing they could do is leave out Dom Bess. It's something that at CricViz we've spoken about quite often this summer, the fact that they don't really need to have Bess in their side. And I don't think right now Dom Bess is in England's best 11. But I think England are investing in Dom Bess as a long-term project, particularly with tours to India coming up this winter. So if they're going to continue down that path, then I think they'll if they're going to continue backing Bess, then they could. But Sam Curran for Bess is something I would consider, because that bolsters the batting a little bit as well. But no, it'll be interesting to see. I think they're going to have to make a change. And it'll be interesting to see what Pakistan do too. I mean, obviously they went with 2 spinners and they went with Shadab at 7. Shadab didn't do that much bowling, but did pretty well with the bat. It'll be interesting to see whether they make. It'd be interesting to see what you guys think. I mean, is that the main spot that's under scrutiny? You think the 3 quicks safe?
Team selection for Pakistan in this test season, it's just it's a huge discussion. Khwaja, I'll start with you. What changes are you making for Thursday?
I think what we fail to recognize is that Shadab was picked for his batting over Fawad Alam. He barely bowled 11 overs in the entire test. And he made a handy 40 in the first innings. So I think the way they used him in the bowling innings, it's pretty clear that he was there as a batsman. So Fawad Alam just got overlooked basically for Shadab.
Which is ridiculous in my opinion. It's absolutely.
It is ridiculous, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Maybe they were scared of Dom Bess and his bowling to left-handers,
Just one guy, though.
I mean, one point on that, I suppose, as well, is that maybe they were lured in by the Manchester track being known for spin, and therefore they went Shadab. Shadab, I agree that it seems like Shadab's batting was the main thing, given the way that it unfolded, but I think they would have looked at his bowling and thought that's useful to have a second spinner potentially in Manchester, somewhere that offers a lot of turn. Might be harsh on him, but right now I definitely have Fawad Alam ahead of him as on batting alone. I mean, there's no question if you look at his domestic record.
What can you tell us about the pitch at Southampton? How is it going to behave?
That's my question too.
Well, I mean, it's a good question because actually the one test match against the West Indies, I think England thought it would turn potentially more than it did. In 2018, England played India in a test and it was very hot and very dry and it ended up turning a lot. Moeen took a few wickets and it was a pitch that dried out a lot and the footholes played havoc on the 4th day. It didn't even go to 5 days and still turned a lot. And I think informed England's selection in the first test when they picked best. Some people thought they might not. The weather has improved recently in the UK. We're going through a bit of a heat wave at the moment, and that might encourage England again to think that there's going to be some spin on offer. But generally, it doesn't turn, or it didn't turn as much in the West Indies Test match as it did in the India Test match. So that's the really interesting one, basically, is how the weather behaves over the next couple of days. Certainly for the Test match, the third Test, they won't be using the same wicket, but a square that has been used a lot. You'd have thought that will offer some turn then, but it won't spin as much as Manchester, because Manchester's renowned for producing a decent amount of turn.
Yeah. Ahmed, I'm gonna ask you what your team selection is. Don't jump around it like AZ does, because I know he's thinking about making that final selection. And Freddie, we will make you select that final England 11. But Ahmed, what is going to be your selection on Thursday for Pakistan?
Look, honestly, I want to go something drastic. I'm not very happy with Asad Shafiq's position in this lineup. I feel like you can't have both Azhar Ali and Asad Shafiq batting the way that they are. If you're going to give Fawad the chance, you might as well bring him in at number 5. Let him have that opportunity. Get him to settle in, because, again, I see that Shadab Khan plays simply because he still, despite the fact that he only bowled 11 overs, still gives you that additional bowler, right? Pakistan don't have those all-rounders or those part-time spinners that they used to have in the past, Hafiz and all of these guys. I would go with Fawad at number 5. Mix in the right left-hand combination a bit too. I don't think the fast bowlers will be rested. I think these 3 will play across the 3 matches unless something happens in terms of injuries. But it's asking a lot of a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old to bowl in back-to-back matches within the span of 5 days. So if they were to drop maybe Naseem, I would be okay with it, because I feel like they might bring in another left-hander in Wahab Riaz. I feel like the reason he's in that squad, he's going to be ahead of guys like Shinwari. He's going to be ahead of the other folks. Again, he's retired from Test cricket, but he's in the squad, so he's there for a reason.
Retirements are meaningless.
Retirements don't mean anything, exactly. So I feel like if they're going to make that change, they're going to go with something drastic. I'm glad we kind of lost the Test, because had we not lost, we weren't going to look over these flaws and mistakes that we have in the team right now. But maybe this loss might prompt a bit of change, which I'd be welcome to see.
We're gonna definitely cut you out saying you're glad that we lost the Test, because nobody's.
I'm saying silver linings. Silver linings.
I think another thing we're underestimating about Asad Shafiq's contribution, or lack thereof, is his slip catching. Yeah. Our slip fielding, he's been very solid. And of course, we don't have Haris Sohail, who's a regular first slipper. We have Babarin, who did a very good job. And so far, maybe he was standing back a bit, but he took the clean catch of Joe Root when it was required. So I don't think they want to further destabilize that slip cordon, as is with Asad Shafiq missing for Fawad Alam. But I think I think Asad versus Fawad might be a good stiff competition. I think there might be
still not committing to it. Maybe, I don't know.
Make your pick.
That's
yes or no. Give me a yes or no.
As a punt, I'd go for it. Why not? Go for it.
You're going for Fawad, and you're keeping the bowling the same.
Yeah, the bowling
for this test.
The thing is, our bench is awful. Who's going to bowl? Sohail Khan, Imran
Shinwari.
Khan. They're trundles.
So Shadab is also staying in the side for you, Khwaja?
He batted well.
Leave him in there. I think he had something in the field, something with the bat. And of course, he's a 5th bowling option. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Freddie? James.
Well, I'll just a brief comment on Pakistan. For what it's worth, I wouldn't drop Shafiq. I think whilst he's in a lean run, I'd back him in as someone who's got experience.
He's in a perpetual lean run.
Yeah.
I'd back him. I would make one change if I was Pakistan, and I'd bring Fawad Alam in for Shadab, but they won't. I don't think they'll do that, because I think Shadab did well enough in the first test to keep his spot, and I'm not too bothered by that. I would have just picked Fawad as a proper batsman ahead of Shadab in the last test anyway, because I don't think you need 2 spinners in England, even in Manchester where it does offer spin. Shadab's a good fielder. He did drop a catch, but he's a good fielder and he's a good all-round player, and he adds some value, so I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah. From England's perspective, Stokes is out. Zach Crawley comes straight in for me, so he goes into 3, Root back down to 4. Pope would then be at 5, Buttler 6, Woakes 7. I would, if I were England, I'd leave Bess out. I'm a big Don Bess fan, but I don't think he's in their best side at the moment, and I'd bring Sam Curran in. He bolsters England slightly in the batting, and he's a slightly better batsman than Bess, and England are going to be slightly weaker without Stokes. I think that's useful to have, and he brings a left arm angle. So I do that, but I don't think they will. I think England will just make the one
five
change.
pace bowlers, Freddie, 5 pace bowlers. And another question, Joe Root, his recent comments about Jofra, he's like, it's hard to play back-to-back tests and this and that.
Sure, yeah, they could, they might, and if Jofra is left out, then Wood should come in for me as the sort of like for like. If that's what they do, because I just like the idea of having someone who brings something different. I suppose Curran does too, and he's a left armer. I mean, I found that comment quite interesting. He almost was making it out as if Jofra didn't bowl that well, but Jofra still took, I can't remember off the top of my head, I can't remember how many wickets to be. It was a good performance. I don't think he was
3 or 4.
Yeah, exactly. It was better than Anderson in terms of wickets, right? And so Archer, for me, Archer gets a lot of flack, probably unnecessarily. It's almost like, why is he not bowling?
He was not bowling. He was not bowling that quick though, Freddie.
For me, that was but neither was Anderson, right? And Anderson didn't have as good figures as Archer. It's just we judge Archer almost by other measures. We're looking at the speed gun when actually he still took a handful of wickets. Admittedly, at times you want Archer to run in and rough them up. I think he's still got that in him. He spoke after the third day or the second day about how he just didn't think this was a pitch where you could do that.
Yeah,
might be wrong, but that I don't know. I found those comments quite interesting. But yeah, Archer may well do some rest and rotation there, and Wood could come in for Archer.
Especially
but the only
with the
change
win in the first game.
Yeah, the only change that I think will definitely happen is Crawley for Stokes. And then what they do with the attack, we'll have to wait and see. And it might depend again on the weather and conditions. England seem very keen to persist with Dom Bess, which I think is interesting because Pakistan are such good players of spin. I mean, we saw that with Shan and Babar during their partnership. They took it, they were very content milking him around.
Pretty comfortable.
And with only one left-hander in Pakistan's top order too, it makes it less likely that Bess is going to be that effective, but they seem to be backing him, so perhaps they'll keep doing that for the rest of the summer.
And what happened to Mr. Specsavers, Jack Leach? Is he out of?
Well, I mean, no, he's still in. So he's still in and around the squad. At the beginning of the summer, when they picked their first team for the summer, they went with Bess ahead of Leach, which was an interesting move because I think Leach right now is the better bowler.
Right.
They were a little bit worried at the beginning of the summer about England's lack of depth. So with Archer, Broad, obviously Broad's had a bit of resurgence with the bat, and Anderson, I think they were a bit worried that Leach too, with those three, would have been a very long tail, whereas Bess offers something with the bat and in the field. They like Bess's all-round contribution. It's very similar to Shadab, actually. They look at him as a sort of three-dimensional cricketer, one for the future too. So both those two players are similar, I think, in that respect. But Leach is probably the better spinner right now and matches up better with Pakistan and the West Indies. So it's very interesting that they chose to go with Bess. But I think that they're backing in Bess. It would be a surprise for me if they went to Leach now, having backed Bess for 4 previous Test matches.
And what about Ollie Robinson?
The sight of a left-arm spinner is all over. We would have fainted seeing Jack Leach in that Test, to be quite honest.
Well, he certainly matches up better. And then Robinson's an interesting one. I mean, obviously was added to the squad after Abbas's success. And Robinson's a similar bowler, line and length, not quick, but moves it around. I'd be surprised if they went for him. I mean, Curran was ahead of him in the pecking order most recently, and for Robinson to then vault ahead of him, I don't think that would happen. I think, again, it's just more a case of getting him in and around the group, but I might be wrong. He's a quality player and someone who at CricViz we've been very keen on for a number of years in English conditions, as Abbas has proven, as Philander has proven. Just that kind of 75, 80 mile an hour on a length is very destructive, and I expect he would have success if he played. It just speaks to England's riches, fast bowling riches that he can't get inside at the moment.
Yeah, specifically
a bit too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. England have got those riches of not just fast bowlers, but fast bowlers that can bat, as Emmett said. But before we go to predictions, Freddie, to close out the show, just first of all, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been different because a lot of times on the Pakistani show we get carried away with the emotional side of things, and we say, we talk about a lot of the intangibles in cricket, like body language and what you've said and what you haven't said, but a very statistical approach to what will be, I think, still a riveting Test series. But before I get final predictions from you guys, we do have a little bit of a tradition on the show to ask whoever comes on who their favorite ever Pakistani cricketer is. So we're going to put you on the spot, Freddie, and you're going to have to come up with one name, because I know people always go Saeed Anwar and Wasim Akram, but you're going to have to go and pick one.
Shahid Afridi.
Oh, God.
Shahid or Shaheen?
Shahid.
Shahid. Oh,
boom,
God.
boom.
You're going to have to explain.
You're not
that.
alone. You're not alone here.
I mean, I'm I'm a cricket fan who's very much more aligned with T20 than other formats of cricket, and there are probably few players ever to better encapsulate the sort of spirit of T20 than Afridi. He bowls leg spin. Leg spin is, as everyone knows, hugely effective. Bowls fast leg spin. He inspired Rashid Khan, in fact. He gives the ball a whack. What is it? Strike rate of like 150, 160. He can bat anywhere from 1 to 9. He's an entertainer. I think, I can understand as a Pakistani fan that he might be someone who's more frustrating and you have more mixed emotions towards. But from the outside, and someone who just loves cricket, then Shahid Afridi, he's constantly entertaining and still going at, what is he now, like 56 years old. So no, it's can look no further than him.
Well, you're the first to say Shahid Afridi, but I think that's fair. And honestly, even as a Pakistan fan, there's a lot of people in our country that would have a very similar response to that question. But let's go around to close out the episode. It's been a good one. But Khwaja, again, I just want a number. 2 left. England are 1-0 up. What's going to be the final score of the series?
I think after losing that first test, it's going to be a huge uphill task to get back into it. But I'm a dreamer, so I'll still say we'll draw the series. Maybe we'll get a washout in Southampton later on or something. A hurricane or a tidal wave will take us all out.
So you're going 1-1. Ahmed, what about you?
Yeah, 2-0 England. I don't see us coming back because I think we blew our best opportunity. That was the last match. And I feel like we can salvage a draw somewhere in there. Maybe the third one when we have nothing left to play for except pride. But I don't see the next match going in Pakistan's favor.
Freddie?
2-1. That was my series to England. That was my series prediction at the start of the series. I think, had Pakistan won this test, we'd have a real test series on our hands. Obviously, England already come back from 1-0 down. I still think Pakistan have got enough firepower to win a test match. I hope it's the next one, so we go to Southampton for the third one with the series on the line. But I see Pakistan nicking one still. Just because they've lost one doesn't change my perspective that they're still good enough to win one.
Right. Well, that's it from us today. Again, thank you for Freddie for coming on, explaining the WinViz and calming us down a bit, understanding.
And we explained DilViz to him.
DilViz,
And
exactly.
DilViz, right back to you.
I look forward to tracking DilViz during the next test match.
Yeah, we'll be live again from Thursday covering the Pakistan versus England Test Series. Make sure you give CricViz and Freddie a follow as well. We'll leave their details on our YouTube channel below. And until then, take care of yourself. Give us a prayer for Pakistan cricket as we always need some of that, some extra help. And stay tuned to Change of Pace.